Dear students, welcome to the fourth recorded lecture of Principles of Economics course. And in this record, we will explain the first part of chapter 3. This chapter is entitled as Demand and Supply, which means that we will discuss the market forces and how the interaction between the demand and supply determine the equilibrium quantity and equilibrium price. Let's start by outlining the main learning outcomes of this lecture. In this lecture, we will define market and describe the competitive market. Then we will talk about the first side of the market, which is the demand. So we will define demand and explain the law of demand, which shows the relationship between the quantity demanded of a good and its price. We will also cover how we can express the law of demand using demand schedule and demand curve. We will also talk about the determinants of demand, or the factors that lead to a decrease or an increase in the demand. We also will talk about the difference between a change in quantity demanded and a change in demand. And now let's start with the first point in this lecture, which is the meaning of the market. Well, when you want to buy any good or service, you must find a place where people sell those goods or offer those services. So this place is called the market. So we can define the market as it's any arrangement that enables buyers and sellers to get information and to do business with each other. So the market enables consumers and producers to connect so they can exchange commodities and make transactions. So in markets, buyers who represent the demand side can buy the goods and services provided by the sellers who represent the supply side. So you may ask how the prices is determined in the market. In this chapter, we will talk about how prices are determined in one type of markets, which is known as competitive markets. So competitive markets is a market in which we have many buyers and many sellers. Then the price is determined according to the interaction between the demand and supply, as we will see later in this chapter. So based on that, we can define the competitive market as the market in which there are many buyers and many sellers. So no single buyer or seller can affect the price. So we can say that both consumers and producers are price takers, not price makers. Well, some markets are physical places where buyers and sellers meet with each other. So this means that buyers and sellers exist in the same place to be able to do the transaction. Examples of this type of markets are the wholesale fish or meat markets, or the supermarket that you buy your stuff from. On the other hand, there are some other markets may not be physical places. However, buyers and sellers can make transactions. This means that some markets are groups of people who spread around the world, who never meet and know little about each other, but they are connected through the internet or by telephone or by fax. Examples of these markets are electronic commerce or e-commerce markets, such as buying your goods and serve or goods from a website such as Jumia or Souq or Amazon. Now let's move to the second point of this lecture, which is the definition or the meaning of demand. If you want something, this means that you want it, you can afford it, which means that you can pay its price to get it, and you have made a definite plan to buy it. Well, at this point, you may be confused between the word wants and the demand. What is the difference between wants and demand? Basically, wants are the unlimited desires people have for goods and services. And as we have explained earlier, we have limited resources or limited incomes, so we cannot satisfy all the needs and wants. So here we have two cases of wants. First, if you want a good, but you cannot pay for it, so it will not be purchased. In this case, wants will not be considered as demand. Second case, if you want something and you can pay for it and you have decided or make a plan to buy it, then this want will become a demand. Based on that, we can say that demand reflects a decision about which wants to satisfy. Now, what is the quantity demanded of a good or service? The quantity demanded of a good or service is the amount consumers plan to buy during a particular time period and at a given price. Well, the quantity demanded may be higher than the quantity actually bought. How can this happen? This could happen because sometimes the quantity demanded will be higher than the amount of goods available in the market, which means that the quantity that people will purchase is lower than the amount they plan to get. Also, we measure the quantity demanded as the amount demanded at a given point of time. For example, you may plan to buy a cup of coffee each day. So here we can say that the quantity demanded of coffee is 1 cup per day or 7 cups per week or 30 cups per month and so on. So here we should mention the time period during which we demand this good. Now let's move to explain the factors that affect the demand on different goods and services. Basically, there are many factors that may affect our plans to buy a certain good. But in the beginning, we will focus on the impact of price on the quantity demanded, and we will assume that all other factors are constant. So, to explain the relationship between price and the quantity demanded, we will use the law of demand, which states that other things remaining the same, the higher the price of a good, the smaller is the quantity demanded, and the lower the price of a good, the larger is the quantity demanded. So, this means that there is a negative relationship between the quantity demanded of a good and its price, so they move in opposite directions. This relation seems logic, but why does a higher price reduce the quantity demand? Well, the law of demand results from two effects, which are substitution effect and income effect. What is the substitution effect? According to the substitution effect, when the relative price or the opportunity cost of a good increases, then people will try to find other goods as substitutes for the good with the higher price. So in this case, the quantity demanded of this good or service will decrease. To clarify the idea, suppose that the initial price of a cup of coffee that you are used to drink in the university is £5. Then what will happen if the price of this cup increases from £5 to £8? In this case, you will decrease your purchases of coffee and try to find another substitute, so you may purchase tea instead of coffee in this case. Then, what about the income effect? The income effect states that when the price of a good or service increases relative to the income, then because people have limited incomes, then they will not be able to afford or buy all the things that they previously bought. So in this case, the quantity demanded of the good or service will decrease. To explain the income effect, recall our example of the coffee that you are used to drink at the university, where its initial price was £5. So if you are used to buy a cup of coffee every day and you go to university for 5 days per week, then you spend around £25 on coffee each week. So now, as I said, if the price of coffee increases from £5 to £8, then your budget of £25 will not enable you to buy the 5 cups that you are used to purchase every week. So, since the price increases relative to your income, you have to decrease your purchases of the coffee. So, we can say that you have changed your buying plans because of the income effect. So, as we have seen, when the price of coffee increased, the quantity demanded decreased. This was because of two factors, which are the substitution of tea in place of coffee, and also because you have to decrease your consumption because your income will not be sufficient to buy the usual amount of coffee that you were used to buy every week. Now let's see how we can express the relationship between the quantity demanded and the price using the demand curve and demand schedule. The word demand refers to the entire relationship between the price of the good and the quantity demanded of the good. So it shows us the quantity demanded at different prices. For example, if we look at this table, we can see that if the price of the commodity is $half, then the quantity demanded will be 22 million units per week. Then, if the price is $1, then the quantity demanded is 15 million units. And then if the price increased to 1.5, 2, and 2.5, then the quantity demanded will decrease. So here, as we can see, we have different prices, and for each price we have different quantity demanded. So demand shows us the entire or the whole relationship between different prices and the quantity demanded at each price. So as we can see, we can use the demand schedule to show us the demand on the commodity. Another way of representing the demand law is the demand curve, which shows the relationship between the quantity demanded expressed on the x-axis and the price of the commodity expressed on the y-axis. So, as we can see, we can define the demand curve as a curve that shows the relationship between the quantity demanded of a good and its price when all other factors on consumers' plans remain the same. So as we can see here in this graph, this curve slopes downward to show us the negative relationship between the quantity demanded and the price. As we can see on this curve, if the price of the commodity increases from $half to $1, the quantity demanded will decrease from around 22 million to just 15 million. And on the other hand, if the price of the commodity decreases from 2.5 to 1.5, for example, then the quantity will increase by this amount. So here the graph shows us the negative relationship between the quantity demanded and the price. The demand curve also shows the willingness and ability to pay. What is the meaning of willingness and ability to pay? It means the highest price that we are willing and we are able to buy to purchase an additional unit. For example, if the available quantity of the commodity in the market is too small, then people will have the incentive to pay a higher price to get another unit of this good, as we have explained in chapter 2, and we have said that willingness to pay measures the marginal benefit. So this means that if the quantity available increases, then the marginal benefit of each additional unit will decrease as well, and people's willingness to pay will be lower. Well, at the previous slide, we have seen that a change in price will lead to a change in the quantity demanded on the same curve. But sometimes there are some other factors that will lead to a change in the whole demand curve. So at each price, the quantity demanded will change. So in this case, the whole demand curve will shift to the right or to the left, depending on the change of the factors. So here we have 6 factors that may lead to a change in the whole demand curve. These factors are the prices of related goods, expected future prices, income, expected future income, population, and preferences. Well, now let's discuss the first factor that will lead to a change in the whole demand curve, which is the price of related goods. And here we have two types of related goods, which are substitutes and complementary. What is the meaning of substitutes? It means that a good that can be used in place of another good, such as Coca-Cola and Pepsi, car, motorbikes, bike, and public transport. Also, you can use either butter or cooking oil, tea or coffee, and so on. So, as I said, substitute good means that it can be used in place of each other. And of course, higher price of substitutes leads to higher demand on the good. So if the price of coffee increase, then the demand on tea will increase. Then what is the meaning of complementary good? It means a good that is used in combination with another good. So here both commodities will be consumed together, like what? Like cars and oil, shoes and polish, computer hardware and computer software. You cannot use computer hardware without software. You cannot use the printer without ink, and so on. So here, if the price of complementary increase, this will lead to a reduction on the demand of the good. Second factor that will lead to a change in the demand is expected future prices. So if the expected future prices of a good increase, this means that people will try to buy more of the good now before the increase in price. So the current demand for the good will increase and the demand curve will shift to the right. In opposite, if people expect that prices will will decrease in the future, so they will delay their purchase now and current demand will decrease. And in this case, the demand curve will shift to the left. Third factor is the income. Basically, when income increases, consumers buy more of most of goods, so the demand curve will shift to the right. But here we have to distinguish between two types of goods, which are normal good and inferior good. For normal good is a good for which the demand increases as income increases. So most of goods are normal goods. What about inferior goods? Inferior goods is a good for which the demand decreases if the income increases. Examples of inferior goods are may include cooking oil. So people with low income use oil to cook their meals, but if they have increase in their income, they will decrease their demand on oil and will replace it with another alternative, which is butter, for example. The fourth factor that will lead to a change in demand is expected future income and credit. So when people expect that they will have higher income in the future, or if they can get credit from banks easily, then they can increase their demand on different goods and services. And of course, in this case, the demand curve will shift to the right. Fifth factor is population. When the number of population increase, this means that they will demand more of the goods or all goods. Uh, Last factor is preferences. And here, people with the same income have different demands if they have different preferences. So we may have equal incomes, but because I prefer something, I will buy more than you. So, as I said, when we have an increase in the demand, then the demand curve will shift to the right, or if we have a decrease in the demand curve will shift to the left. So what is the main difference between a change in quantity demanded and a change in demand? A change in demand will happen because a change in any of these 6 factors that I have just explained, a change in the prices of related goods, a change in future income, expected future prices, population preferences. So all these factors will lead to a change in the demand. So the whole demand curve will move from its place either to the right or to the left. But the change in quantity demanded will happen only if we have a change in the price of the commodity. And in this case, the quantity demanded will change along the same demand curve. Um, I will stop at this point where we have covered the meaning of the market and the competitive market. Also, we have explained the difference between the demand and the quantity demanded, and we covered the law of demand, and we explained the negative relationship between the quantity demanded of a good and its price, and we have seen how we can express this relation using the demand schedule and the demand curve. We have also explained the difference between the income effect and the substitution effect, and finally we ended with explaining the change in demand and a change in quantity demanded and what are the factors that will lead to each of them. Thank you for watching and see you next week.